Welcome back, everyone, to Season 9. This season we're doing something pretty different. We're diving into the world of the Syriac early church fathers. These are these incredibly influential figures that really shaped early Christian theology, biblical interpretation, ascetic practices, you name it.
Huge.
And just like all of our explorations this season, the research for this deep dive has been done by Andre Mubarak.
Love Andre.
He's an Aramaic-speaking Christian.
Yes.
He's a teacher and a tour guide from Jerusalem.
Awesome.
He lives in Jerusalem, and he teaches the Aramaic roots of our Christian faith.
That's so important.
So if you are interested in learning more about his work, please visit his website, www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.
It's a goldmine.
Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive
Love these.
into the work of John bar Penkaye. He was an East Syriac historian and theologian from the late 7th century.
Wow, 7th century.
So we have all of the provided material detailing his life and his most major work,
Okay.
which is the Ktâbâ d-rêš mellê,
Say that 5 times fast.
for summary history of the world.
Okay, makes sense.
And our mission today is to unpack what makes this historical and theological work so significant, especially the insights that he gives into this pivotal period of transition.
Love it. Let's go.
Where do we even begin with this guy?
Well, John bar Penkaye,
Okay.
he was really a remarkable individual.
Yeah.
Navigating a period of just immense upheaval.
Oh, yeah.
And his writings give us such a direct line to the perspectives of a Christian community that's living through the dramatic shifts of the 7th century.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into this. Who was John bar Penkaye? What were the key aspects of his life that shaped his writing?
John bar Penkaye lived roughly between 610 and 693 A.D.
Okay.
and was a significant figure within the East Syriac tradition, sometimes referred to as the Church of the East.
Interesting.
His origins likely lie in the Fennec region near the Tigris River, in what is now modern-day Iraq. A defining aspect of his life was his embrace of monasticism.
Interesting.
He spent significant time in the monasteries of Marcain, John of Camul, and Mar Basima. It fostered a focus on spiritual contemplation and a critical perspective on worldly affairs.
Right. So it sounds like he was living this life immersed in spiritual discipline.
Totally.
And as we touched on earlier, this was a very specific and transformative historical context.
Yes, indeed.
So can you talk about that a little bit more?
He lived in North Mesopotamia under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate,
Okay.
specifically during the reign of Caliph Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan.
So that places him.
This places him right in the middle of a period of enormous political and social change,
Right.
with the rise of the Arab Caliphate profoundly reshaping the region.
Front row seat
Front row seat.
to the rise of a new empire.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So let's dive into his major work,
Okay.
the summary history of the world.
All right.
So what's the scope of this 15-book undertaking?
15 books.
And why is it considered such a rare and valuable source
Okay.
for understanding this era?
The Ktâbâ d-rêš,
Yeah.
or Summary History of the World,
Right.
completed around 687 CE, was a truly ambitious project.
I bet 15 books.
Across its 15 books, it aimed to provide a comprehensive historical narrative,
Wow.
stretching from the creation of the world right up to John's own lifetime. Its rarity and immense value lie in the fact that it stands as one of the very few surviving non-Islamic historical accounts from this crucial transitional period.
So valuable.
Right.
That's amazing.
It offers us a vital Christian perspective on events
Okay.
that were increasingly being documented by the new ruling powers.
So fascinating.
It really is.
Okay, so 15 books, that's a monumental effort.
Huge.
Can you just give us a brief overview
Sure.
of what those 15 books actually cover?
Certainly the initial 4 books
Okay.
cover the foundational biblical narrative, starting with creation and extending to the time of Herod the Great. Book 5 then takes an interesting turn,
Interesting.
focusing on the theological understanding of demons,
Okay.
which was a significant area of thought in that era.
Yeah, for sure.
Books 6 through 8
Okay.
explore what's known as Old Testament typology,
So what's that?
which is essentially the idea that events and figures in the Old Testament
Okay.
foreshadow those in the New Testament,
I see.
offering layers of meaning and connection between the two. Book 9 examines various pagan cults and religious traditions prevalent at the time,
Okay.
with a particular emphasis on Zoroastrianism.
Right.
which was a dominant religious force in the preceding Persian Empire.
I see.
So
It's really fascinating that he would dedicate a whole book to other religious traditions.
it is pretty cool.
What comes next in this historical summary?
Books 10 through 13
Okay.
focus on the core of Christian belief,
All right.
detailing the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ,
Okay.
as well as the activities of his disciples and the early church. Book 14 then shifts to more recent history,
Okay.
chronicling the major events leading up to the Arab conquests of the region.
Oh, wow.
And finally,
Yeah.
and perhaps most captivatingly,
Okay.
Book 15 offers an eyewitness account of events that occurred up to 686 CE.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
This includes vivid descriptions of famine, plague, and the political instability of his time.
A primary source document.
It really is.
Now that we have a sense of just the breadth
Yeah,
of his summary history,
totally.
let's delve into some of the overarching themes
Okay,
that emerge from this monumental work.
right.
It sounds like it's much more than just a chronological list of events.
Absolutely. John Bar Penkaye weaves together several key themes,
Okay.
interpreting the course of history through a distinctly theological lens.
I see.
A primary theme is his understanding of creation
Okay.
and the entirety of biblical history. He doesn't simply retell the stories.
Okay.
He consistently emphasizes God's active involvement, divine providence in shaping events, and drawing out moral and spiritual lessons from the biblical narratives.
So he's looking at history, theological purpose, viewing it through the framework of God's active role.
You got it.
Okay, so what about his engagement with other faiths? Considering he dedicated a whole book
You
to
did.
pagan cults.
Yeah, as we mentioned with Book 9, a significant theme in his work is a critique of paganism
Okay.
and other non-Christian religious traditions, with Zoroastrianism receiving particular attention.
Okay.
He often highlights what he perceives to be their theological and moral deficiencies, in contrast to Christian teachings.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very heart of his work,
Right.
I imagine we find core Christian doctrines.
Precisely.
Okay.
Christology.
Yes.
The understanding of the person and work of Christ,
Mm.
and other fundamental Christian doctrines are central to his summary history.
Yeah.
He consistently emphasizes Christ as the fulfillment of the prophecies found in the Old Testament,
I see.
a crucial element in early Christian apologetics, and explores theological themes that were particularly important
Okay.
within the East Syriac tradition,
Yeah.
a branch of early Christianity with its own unique theological nuances and practices.
I see. Okay. And he also addresses the rise and fall of empires, Byzantine and Persian.
Huge.
How does he interpret these significant shifts in global power?
He views the trajectory of empires,
Okay.
including their ascendance and eventual decline, as integral to God's overarching plan for humanity.
So these events aren't seen as...
Right, they're not seen as arbitrary occurrences,
Right.
but rather as part of a divinely orchestrated historical progression.
So fascinating.
It is.
Okay, so let's get into this.
Yeah.
This is a pivotal point.
Absolutely.
The Arab conquests, he's living through this transformative period.
Yeah.
How does he interpret these events?
This is where his perspective becomes particularly insightful.
Okay.
And for us today, quite fascinating.
Yeah.
John Bar Penkaye interprets the early Islamic conquests
Okay.
as a form of divine chastisement
Wow.
for the sins of humanity,
Right.
with a particular emphasis on what he perceived as the moral and spiritual failings.
Yeah.
Within the Christian community itself,
Right.
interestingly,
Yeah.
he portrays Muhammad
Okay.
as a figure who guided his followers towards monotheism
Mm-hmm.
and a strict adherence to laws.
Okay.
He draws a notable contrast between what he saw as their discipline
Right.
and a perceived decline in Christian moral standards during his time.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Isn't it?
So he's seeing the arrival of a new power
Right.
as divine correction.
Exactly.
Did he give any specific reasons why he
Yeah.
believed the Christian community was particularly deserving of this chastisement?
While he doesn't always go into granular detail,
Okay.
his writings express concern
Okay.
over internal divisions within the church,
Mm-hmm.
a perceived laxity in religious observance,
Right.
and a general moral decline among believers.
Okay.
He connects these internal failings
Right.
directly to the societal sufferings of his era,
Right.
such as famine, plague, and warfare,
Mm-hmm.
viewing these hardships as manifestations of divine displeasure
Yeah.
and calls for repentance.
So it sounds like his final book, his contemporary experiences would have this
Oh, yeah.
Strong sense of urgency and anticipation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The 15th and final book of his history is heavily colored by apocalyptic expectations.
Okay.
He interprets the contemporary events he was living through,
Right.
the widespread plagues, the ongoing wars,
Right.
the palpable political instability,
Yeah.
as potential signs pointing towards an impending divine judgment and the end times.
Oh, wow.
His work concludes with a clear call for repentance and a renewed commitment to the spiritual life in the face of these perceived tribulations.
Okay, so what does all of this tell us
Right.
in terms of historical significance?
Yeah.
Why is John Bar Penkaye's work so crucial for us today, trying to understand this distant but formative period?
John Bar Penkaye's summary history holds immense historical significance
Yeah.
because it offers one of the very few surviving non-Islamic, right?
And, importantly, contemporary accounts
I see.
of the early decades of Islamic rule.
Okay, so,
This provides us with a vital
right.
and often contrasting perspective
Yeah.
to the narratives that would later become dominant under the caliphate.
So fascinating.
It gives us invaluable insights into how Christian communities on the ground experienced and interpreted the Arab conquests, the theological frameworks they used to understand these profound changes,
Yeah.
and the complex interreligious dynamics of the time.
That's so interesting.
It really is.
And as we touched on earlier, his legacy extends beyond.
Yes, it does.
This is one work.
It's quite remarkable that while his summary history is his most widely known work, several other theological and historical writings are preserved in manuscript form in various collections, including the Vatican Library.
So there's even more out there.
This suggests that there's still much to be learned from his intellectual contribution. So scholars are continuing to study his works
Yes, they are.
for their unique insights into this pivotal era of history and the development of East Syriac Christian thought.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's delve a bit more specifically
Okay.
into John Bar Penkaye's perspective on the Byzantine and Persian empires.
Right.
He witnessed their long and destructive conflicts.
He did.
How does he depict their relationship? And what theological meaning does he draw from their seemingly endless wars?
John Bar Penkaye portrays the relationship between the Byzantine and Persian empires as characterized by relentless and devastating warfare.
Okay.
He particularly emphasizes the profound destruction and suffering caused by the protracted Byzantine-Sasanian War of the early 7th century.
Okay. So
He doesn't view these conflicts merely as political power struggles. Instead, he interprets them through a theological lens, seeing their constant fighting as symptomatic of human pride, greed, and sinfulness, ultimately leading both empires down a path of mutual exhaustion and decline.
So in his view, these incessant battles weren't just strategic miscalculations.
Not just that.
They were indicators of deeper spiritual failings.
Precisely.
Okay, so how does he frame?
He frames the eventual weakening and decline of both empires
Right.
as a form of divine judgment.
I see.
He suggests that their moral and spiritual shortcomings paved the way for their vulnerability, and that God used these extended conflicts as a means to humble their proud spirits.
Right.
In his interpretation, their downfall wasn't simply a matter of shifting military power. It was part of a larger divine plan to address what he perceived as the sinfulness of these once mighty kingdoms.
So fascinating.
Yeah.
And this period of weakened empires directly precedes, and in his view, perhaps even facilitates the rise of the Arab powers.
Exactly.
Okay.
John Bar Penkaye highlights how the prolonged and mutually destructive rivalry between the Byzantines and Persian empires left both in a state of significant military and economic weakness, making them far more susceptible to the Arab conquests.
Right.
He seems to view this transition to Arab rule as almost divinely ordained,
Wow.
with the new rulers acting as instruments of God's will to establish a new order,
Right.
one that, at least in the initial period, offered a degree of stability and even justice after the prolonged chaos of the preceding centuries.
What did he see as the lasting impact of these imperial conflicts and the subsequent Arab arrival?
He clearly recognized the significant territorial losses for both the Byzantine and Persian empires. The Byzantine Empire was substantially reduced in size and influence, and the once dominant Persian Empire was effectively dismantled and replaced. He views this as a major turning point in the course of history, a fundamental shift in the global balance of power that laid the groundwork for the new Arab governance in the region where he lived and wrote.
It's incredible how he's able to so clearly see
It is.
these huge historical shifts
Right.
as they're happening.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up,
Okay.
what stands out to you
Wow.
most profoundly from John Bar Penkaye's writings?
Okay.
What key insight do you think is most important for us to take away?
For me, what's most remarkable is his immediate contemporary interpretation of events
Okay.
that we now study as historical turning points.
Right.
We're not looking back centuries later.
Yeah.
We're getting a glimpse into how someone living through the decline of established empires
I see.
and the emergence of a new power
Right.
made sense of it all in real time.
Yeah.
His theological framework, the idea that the rise of the Arab Caliphate could be understood
Okay.
as both divine chastisement
Right.
and a potential source of a new, perhaps more disciplined order,
Yeah.
offers a radically different perspective
Right.
than many later historical narratives.
Yeah.
It really highlights the human need to find meaning in the midst of profound change.
So we've seen
yeah.
how John Bar Penkaye wasn't just recording events.
Totally.
He was actively interpreting them
He was.
through his theological framework,
Right.
striving to understand God's purpose in the grand sweep of empires, right down
Exactly.
to the personal struggles of his own community.
Precisely.
Yeah.
He provides a compelling example
Okay.
of how individuals and communities grapple with immense historical shifts,
Mm-hmm.
seeking understanding and meaning within their existing systems of belief.
Yeah.
His work underscores the enduring human desire to construct a narrative that explains the present in light of the past
Right.
and offers a vision for the future even in uncertain times.
So well said. And this raises a really important question. How do the events unfolding in our own time
Right.
shape our understanding of history?
For sure.
And how might future generations interpret our current moment through their own lenses and belief? John Bar Penkaye's work serves as a powerful reminder, but a narrative
Yes.
that is continually shaped and reshaped by the perspectives and beliefs
You got it.
of those who record and interpret it.
So true.
It really makes you think
I
about
know, right?
what aspects of our present will be emphasized
Yeah.
and how they will be understood centuries from now.
So true.
So before we go, I just wanted to remind everyone that the research that informs our deep dives
Yeah.
into the Syriac early church fathers this season,
Right.
including our exploration of John Bar Penkaye, has been conducted by Andre Mobarak.
Awesome.
He's an Aramaic-speaking Christian teacher and tour guide from Jerusalem.
The best.
Andre offers invaluable insights into the Aramaic roots of Christianity
So cool.
and the historical context of these early figures. You can learn more about his work and his teachings by visiting his website at www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.
A great resource.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
into the world of John Bar Penkaye.
Fascinating guy.
We hope it has sparked your curiosity, reminding us
Right.
that even in times of immense change, individuals and communities strive to find meaning
Absolutely.
and understand their place in the unfolding story.
So true.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.